Reese and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so grateful that you are here and I hope that you are having an absolutely fantastic morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is a case that I am so excited to go through with you guys. We are diving into yet another true black-eyed children's story, except this one has a twist. A paranormal, unexplainable twist, unlike any black-eyed child experience I have ever dove into, ever been told, or have ever read about. And I am so beyond interested to hear what you guys think of this experience, because in a way I feel like it changes everything. And I will explain more about that the further we get into today's video. So buckle up, this one is a wild ride. Before I get into this though, I have a very quick question for those of you who are interested in giving me your feedback. If not, I will have a timestamp here on the screen where you can skip straight to the story. But I am trying to figure out my filming setup now that I am like 95% settled into my new place. I know it's been like 6 months, but so much has been going on. It's been a whirlwind and we're just now getting down to like the nitty-gritty of fully settling here. And one of the things that I've been diving into this past week is exploring different filming setups and different options. I really missed the beautiful white lights behind me that I've had in many of filming setups since the start of my YouTube channel. But something that I've been really enjoying while watching other videos and other content is those who will film with their mic like in front of them, especially when it's longer case style videos. So I'm very curious if you guys would want me to use my professional mic in front of me or just continue using the mic on my camera. What do you think of like the mic that's out of frame versus the mic in front or in frame, I suppose? Let me know if it is something that you would like to chime in on. But with all of that being said, slowly but surely this is going to come together and feel like a beautiful place to be again, despite how creepy the things we talk about are. So with all of that out there, let's get into today's story, because as I mentioned, there's very many, oh my goodness, can I speak today? But with that being said, let's get into today's case, because as I mentioned, there are many layers to this experience. And I want to make sure that the full picture is painted before we get to the conclusion of the experience. Conclusion. There's no proper conclusion, but we will get there. So this encounter and experience begins with a woman named Leanne. Now at the time of the experience, Leanne was in her mid-30s. However, in a majority of her 20s, she had been in a long-term toxic relationship. Now this relationship was very on and off throughout the teenage years and then got more stable and secure throughout their 20s. But again, they were just described as that couple that everybody just knows is no good for one another, but there's like that toxic attraction, that magnet that keeps pulling them back together. And to add more flames to the fire, both of their families felt like each other's families was family, if that makes sense, which I can completely understand being in a long-term relationship. So her mother, throughout all of her 20s, was very encouraging of them working on this relationship and making it work and putting in the work, going to counseling. Her mom wasn't naive to their toxic traits or their toxic traits that they would bring out within one another, but she felt as though they were both such great people that they could rise above this, and that when it was good, it was so good. Now, eventually, it would just be deemed too toxic for Leanne, and she would decide that it was time to end this relationship. She said that it ended pretty brutal. There was no like physical altercations, there was no abuse, but there was so much toxicity in their relationship. It got to a point that everything just boiled over, and the way that it ended was not how either of them or their families had hoped that it would end for them. It ended in hatred for one another at that point in time. They said that the feelings, or she said that the feelings were so deep rooted between the two of them that there was resentment and there was hatred and there was a lot of anger. Now for a couple of months, Leanne and her mother wouldn't really speak because her mom kept trying to tell her, take time for yourself, but don't rule out this relationship. I really think if you guys put in the work, if you go to the counseling, if you do what you have to do, the two of you will be able to work this out. And Leanne felt so misunderstood by her mom. And at that time, she felt incredibly betrayed by her mom. She felt like her mom was siding with him and wasn't understanding how much he had hurt her, how toxic it really was. And she felt as though, as her mother, she should be looking to Leanne, seeing how he made her feel and realizing that whether she likes him or not, or whether she thinks they could put in the work, at this point, it just wasn't good for either of them. So there was a good couple of months that they hardly spoke. And unfortunately, nearing the end of that silent treatment Leanne was giving her mother, Leanne's sister would call and break the devastating news that their mother was terminally ill. Leanne said that the next year and a half was a complete whirlwind. She had left that relationship completely behind her. She had blocked him on all platforms that she could. She blocked his number. She had completely moved on from that and was dedicated to taking care of her mother and making sure that her mother was okay. Despite knowing that unfortunately the end was nearing, she felt as though every single day with her mother was a gift. Now there's a reason that I'm really painting this picture for you guys, because when we get into what would transpire, this is a really important detail to understand. So unfortunately, a year and a half later, Leanne's mother would pass away. And Leanne, as all of us do when somebody that we love passes away, or even someone that we know passes away, we replay all of the what ifs. And Leanne started replaying all of the what ifs. She was replaying, what if I hadn't cut her off for those months? Had the stress progressed the disease? Was I a part of this? Did she know how much I loved her? Did she know that I was just frustrated because I loved her and I wanted her to side with me? And she would go between being angry, angrier than she even was at her ex, because she felt as though he'd robbed her of these months with her mom, because if it wasn't for him and it wasn't for the toxicity and it wasn't for that toxic relationship being or ending at that point, and the trajectory of how her mom would approach it and whatnot, she felt as though she would have had those extra 6 months with her mother rather than losing them because of this relationship. So she was angry at him. But then it would flip again, and from anger, it would switch to wanting to call him and wanting to tell him, and knowing that her mom would want him to know and would want to be a part of this. But she decided that the most important thing that she could do was honor that distance that they created. She had not spoken to him in over 2 years at this point, and she felt as though reopening that, rehashing these things, would just be opening up a can of worms that she felt was truly buried at this point. She felt as though it was time to move on. It was time to find joy and happiness. A couple of years go on, and one thing that Leanne would notice was whenever she needed advice from her mother, she would have these dreams that her mother would visit her in. She became a much more spiritual person because of this. Not that she wasn't spiritual to begin with, but she started believing in the signs in dreams, feeling as though her mother was truly communicating with her. Oftentimes before bed, she would say a prayer and ask her mom for the advice in her dreams, and more often than not, she would get that response, which was incredible. Now, as time went on and the years went on, her memory of that ex slowly faded. The anger towards him faded. There was no longer a hatred towards him or an anger towards him. In fact, she didn't think of him much at all until one day, 4 years after they had last spoken, he popped into her mind, and it was different than it had ever been. At this point, she felt as though there was this weight lifted off of her shoulders when she thought about him. There was forgiveness. There was kindness. There was looking at the good memories instead of the bad, and it didn't make her want to go back to him. Again, she knew that that chapter was closed. She knew that they were toxic for one another, but simultaneously, she knew that there was so much good in that too. And finally, looking back through this new lens, she could comprehend and she could understand why her mother was so adamant on them getting the therapy, getting the counseling, working through it, because she saw that good. And it gave her that peace and brought her closer to her mother, because as she was getting older, she was realizing her mother hadn't minimized how toxic it could be or how bad they could be for each other, but she also saw the good. She wasn't just expecting them to get back together. In fact, she needed them or wanted them to go to therapy and counseling and couples counseling and put in that work both personally and within their relationship in order to make it work. But again, Leanne had closed that chapter. A couple more years go by now, and it's about 6 years after she'd spoken with said boyfriend. At this point, she's moved to a new place, a tiny property in like a rural neighborhood surrounded by forests and creeks and farmland, and she felt like she was really living out her childhood dreams. For so long, she described her life as feeling like everyone else had this plan for her. But when everything slowed down after the passing of her mother, when her relationship had come to an end, when she only had herself to rely on, she finally had this sense of what she wanted, and she realized she was craving this peaceful life. But here's where things get strange. About 6 months into living in her new home, she receives a text message from a number that she does not recognize. And in this text message, it claims that it is her ex-boyfriend reaching out. Now, Leanne decides not to answer the text whatsoever, and a couple of days goes by. But slowly but surely, over the span of a couple of weeks, she begins receiving apologetic text messages from her ex. Text messages that didn't even seem like his way of thinking. But granted, it had been over 6 years at this point. A lot of growth can be had in 6 years. So she wasn't too questioning, just more so grateful that he clearly had some sort of epiphany. In these messages, he was apologetic for every toxic behavior that he exhibited during their relationship. He was apologetic for specific things that she doesn't detail in her recollection of this story. Can I speak? In her recollection of this experience, but yet were very specific things that only he and her would know. Some dark couple stuff that nobody wants to share with their loved ones, because once you share it, it can't be taken back. And he's apologizing for all these things. He's telling her that she was the most beautiful, incredible, wonderful woman that he'd ever met. He wished he could have been better for her, but he understands that he wasn't. And all he wants is for her to be happy and her to be safe. And he even goes on to say that he is so sorry for the passing of her mother, but that she's always watching over her. Now, this kind of took her back when she got that message, because she hadn't spoken to anybody who knew him, and she hadn't reached out to him to tell him. But again, she just assumed that it was kind of word of mouth and that somebody had told him along the way. Here's where things take the most insane turn. You guys are probably wondering, okay, Hailey, get to the point. Where is this going? Guys, this is wild. One night, she has a very unsettling feeling for majority of the evening. She said that her place had always been her safe space. She'd never felt uncomfortable in the time that she'd lived in this rural neighborhood. In fact, she'd never felt more safe. But this night, she was jumpy, and she couldn't figure out why. Every little sound, every little thing was putting her on edge. So at this point, she puts on a chick flick, she grabs herself a drink, and she kind of tries to distract herself by this feeling that she's feeling throughout her entire body. And that's when her phone dings loudly, even though she was certain it was on silent, and startles her. When she looks over, it's this number again. When she opens the number, all it says is, "I have to go, but I need you to know, whatever you do, do not answer your door tonight. I love you." And the following message was, "I will always be there for you. Please never doubt how much I loved you. This is my last message to you." Now, at this point, she felt like this was some sort of manipulation, that he was trying to get her to respond because she hadn't responded in all of these weeks and months and whatever. And so she decided to just delete the number, block the number, and move on with her life, because she felt as though at this point he was starting to have too much control over her mind. But again, she could not shake this unsettling feeling. The night continues on, and the movie's almost over, and at this point she's getting ready to go to bed, and that's when she shuts the TV off, shuts the lights off, and goes to walk towards her bedroom when she hears bang, bang, bang on her front door. She stops dead in her tracks at this point. She said she could hear her heart beating and literally hear her breath coming out of her, even though she was trying to breathe as quietly as possible. And she's just listening. A couple moments later, bang, bang, bang on the door. At this point, she's wondering, is this my ex? Has he gone crazy? I mean, how did he get my new number? Anyways, oh, that was another thing I didn't mention. She had a total new number. How did he get my new number? Anyways, how does he know about things going on in my life? How did he know someone was going to come to my door unless it was me? But then why would he say don't answer it? So she goes to continue walking to her room when again she hears bang, 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 followed by, "Can we come in?" She's terrified because not only is that a voice that she doesn't recognize, but it's also a child's voice. Now at this point, she had yet to see any children nearby to where she lived. Granted, she hadn't lived there long, but she describes it as a more of an elderly, more mature area to live in. So she decides to kind of creak back towards a window that could see towards the front door because all the lights were off at this point, so she felt as though they wouldn't be able to see her. And that was when she goes to peek out the window and looks over and sees two children staring at the door, standing almost perfectly still, saying, "We know you're in there. Let us in." She wants to get closer to see who these kids are and what they could be doing. So she walks towards the window next to her door and peeks outside. And that's when she sees the two children's face turn directly towards her. And she notices immediately that they have what looks like blacked out eyes, very pale skin, and very dark hair. She said they almost looked soulless. Then one of the kids says to her, "I can see that you're in there. What? Did he tell you not to let us in?" At this point, she feels like she's in a horror movie and is absolutely terrified, so she runs to the kitchen, grabs her phone, and calls 911. She ends up calling for the police to come, and the police do arrive, but once they arrive there is nobody in sight. There's not any children, there's no footprints in like the dewy grass or the dewy mud, and they think that she's kind of paranoid. She goes on to tell them about her ex-boyfriend and the messages that he was sending her and how he told her someone was going to come to the door and she's worried about him. But when they ask to see them, she can't because she's deleted and blocked the number. The police asked her if there was any way that he could have known where she lived or was pulling a prank on her or messing with her because she had described that their relationship ended quite negatively. And she said no, and they said, well, then you know what? It's probably just a coincidence. Give us a call if anything else happens. All looks well here. And they proceeded to leave. That night, she had extreme difficulty falling asleep, but when she finally did, her mother comes to her in her dreams. Her mother walks up to her and says, "I know what you thought of him, but he saved you tonight." And that was when she immediately woke up. Now, this made her feel like she was reliving this trauma of her mom always siding with him because she went to bed feeling like he's messing with her again, he's playing with her mind, it's toxic, it's manipulative, and whatnot. So having this dream, she felt like surely it wasn't truly her mother because now she's just reliving that insecurity that she had while her mother was still alive. So she plays it off. Weeks go by. And she can't shake that night. Now, she didn't know whether he just stopped writing her because she had blocked and deleted the number, or if it was because he just stopped writing her, but there was no other means of communication, and a couple months go by. But she can't shake this feeling. So she finally decides to reach out to his sister. Now, her and his sister were never very close because other than their parents who really supported the relationship, the sister thought it was toxic and never wanted them to be together. But she thought this was the most neutral person that she could reach out to, and she did. She reached out to her on social media and asked her, why was he writing me? What did he mean? How did he know that these kids were coming? She basically explained everything to the sister that I explained to you. And the sister told her off at first. She told her that she was messing with her, that this isn't funny, that the two of them always needed to smarten up, but this is too far, and just went off on her. As I'm sure you can imagine, Leanne was very confused and proceeded to ask her what she was talking about. And she tells her that years ago, her brother had passed away, that there was no way he was texting her, that there was no way that if it was him, he would have known that they were there, and that this was some sort of sick joke. All Leanne could think about was the dream that she had after of him saving her. When she went to go into her blocked phone numbers, that phone number did not exist or was not there. So she either never blocked the number and it wasn't in her blocked list, or it disappeared from the block list, though she was convinced that she had blocked that number. She never received any more messages from him. Those children never returned. And she knows that she saw those kids at her door. She knows they said, "What? Did he tell you not to let us in?" So the more that she dug, she learned about black-eyed children. And part of her believes that perhaps the reason that she got all of these apologetic messages were from the spirit of her ex, making peace with her now from the other side, seeing all the things that he'd done wrong, and that just perhaps he had saved her. But from what? We don't really know. Again, nobody knows exactly what black-eyed children are, whether they're extraterrestrials or they're entities or demons or spirits or their own kind in and of themselves. Nobody's been able to pinpoint what they are. But Leanne is convinced that her ex saved her from them. So eerie. Black-eyed children aside, and the fact that these messages warned her of someone coming to her door that night, I can honestly say getting a message from someone that you know is deceased is bone-chilling. My grandmother, after passing away, somebody hacked her email, and I started getting emails from my grandmother's email with my grandmother's name. And when I tell you the way my stomach and my heart dropped when I logged into my email and saw that Candace Blank was emailing me, I was like, the hell she is. And obviously I know that she was hacked, but this story is just bone-chilling on all ends. I am so interested to hear what you guys think of this. Do you think it was someone messing with her? Do you think perhaps he was tampering with electronics and communicating from the other side? Do you think it was her mom saying, hey, he was saving you? Or what are your thoughts? Comment them down below. And that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you enjoy my content, I would love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button. And please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Why am I singing this? Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until tomorrow, I love you. Bye, guys.